I just finished my first contract on a commercial cargo ship. I need to warn you about what my captain brought back to the mainland. Working on commercial cargo ships is not the romantic adventure some people think it is. You spend most of your time chipping rust, painting over that chipped rust, and trying to ignore the constant vibration of the engine beneath your boots. This was my first maritime contract as a deckhand, and we were crossing into an incredibly isolated stretch of the Pacific Ocean. The crew was already on edge. A week prior, we lost a man named Griggs during a midnight squall. A wave took him right off the starboard deck. We searched for 10 hours, but the ocean swallowed him. So, to be clear, the mood on board was grim after that. Everyone kept to themselves. One of the older deckhands was particularly bitter, as he had been close to Griggs. On a Tuesday afternoon, the Captain Harris ordered me down to the lower storage corridors to inventory a shipment of spare engine flitters. The lower decks of a cargo ship are essentially a maze of narrow walkways and exposed piping. The fluorescent lights flicker constantly due to the electrical faults in the aging vessel. Approaching the aft storage locker, a sharp copper smell hit my nose. It smelled exactly like a butcher shop left in the sun. Stepping around a stack of wooden pallets, my boots splashed into a puddle of dark red liquid. Sullivan was lying on his back against the steel bulkhead with his eyes wide open, staring blankly at the ceiling. His chest was completely torn open, and entire chunks of flesh and muscle were missing from his ribs, exposing the bone underneath. Panic seized my chest. Stumbling backward, my radio slipped out of my shaking hands. Captain Harris, my voice cracked over the channel. You need to get down to afterwards right now. Bring the medical kit. What is the situation down there? Harris replied, his voice laced with static. It is Sullivan. He's dead. Someone killed him. Footsteps ran across the metal stairs a few minutes later. Captain Harris rounded the corner, followed by a young deckhand named Toby. Both men stopped dead in their tracks when they saw the body. Jesus, Toby muttered, turning around to vomit against the wall. Captain Harris stepped forward. He crouched next to Sullivan, pulling a flashlight from his belt to examine the wounds, but keeping a distance. These bite marks? Harris said, keeping his voice low. But there's no animal on the ship. We need to put him in the freezer. Toby suggested, wiping his mouth with the back of his sleeve. We cannot just leave him here. We will move him to the medical bay. Harris decided, standing up and turning towards us. Lock the door. No one goes in or out without my permission. We are 5 days from the nearest port. From the nearest port. Whoever or whatever did this is trapped on the ship with us. We wrapped Sullivan in a plastic tarp and carried him into the medical bay. We locked the steel door behind us, and the rest of the crew was informed. So, as you would expect, the ship went into a state of alert. Everyone was paired up, and no one worked alone. Later that evening, Toby and I were assigned to watch the starboard deck. The sun was setting, turning the ocean into a dark purple. Standing near the railing, we smoked cigarettes and watched the water churn against the hull. You really think a person did that to Solon? Toby asked, flicking his ash into the wind. I don't know, shaking my head. The captain said the wounds looked like bites. If a person did that, they're completely insane. Looking down into the water, a large shadow caught my attention. It was swimming just below the surface, keeping pace perfectly with the ship. Look at that, pointing toward the shadow. Toby leaned over the railing. Is that a shark? It was a shark, but it was massive. The creature must have been 20 feet long. Its gray skin was covered in deep, jagged scars, and as it breached the surface, the remaining sunlight illuminated its dorsal fin and gills. Attached to the shark were pulsating red, meaty appendages. They looked exactly like fleshy coral, sprouting directly out of the animal's flesh. The appendages throbbed rhythmically, expanding and contracting as if they were breathing on their own. What is wrong with it? Toby asked, taking a step back from the railing. Some kind of parasite, maybe. Unable to look away from red grows. I've never seen anything like it. The shark paced the ship for an hour before disappearing into the dark water. But the image of those pulsating red appendages burned into my mind. The situation deteriorated rapidly the next morning. Captain Harris called me over the radio, instructing me to meet him at the medical bay immediately. Reaching the door, he nodded toward the heavy steel door. He nodded toward the heavy steel door. The air down there is freezing. The bloody footprints stopped near the entrance of tank number 4. Harris clicked his gun off safety. He nodded towards the heavy steel door. Open it. Sullivan's corpse was gone. In its place, on top of a metal gurney, was a foul-smelling, fungal-like slurry. The flesh had melted into a thick gray paste mixed with dark red veins, and the slurry was bubbling, eating through the stainless steel of the gurney, with small holes already forming in the metal surface. A human body does not compose like this in 24 hours. Staring at the metal remains in horror. It is biological contaminant, Harry stated, his eyes fixed on the bubbling paste. Whatever got into him is spreading and is consuming the metal. If it eats through the deck, we are going to have a massive breach. What do we do? We throw it overboard? Harris commanded. Right now, grab those hazardous material bags from the cabinet. We double bagged the remaining chunks of Sullivan using plastic and tape. We carefully scooped the fungal slurry into a sealed drum, sealing the lid tight. The entire process was nauseating. Carrying the drum to the edge of the deck, we pushed it over the railing. The steel barrel hit the water with a loud splash. Almost immediately, the scarred shark broke the surface. Its massive jaws snapped open, crushing the steel drum entirely. And before our eyes, the shark swallowed the remains and the metal alike. And then we noticed the red, meaty appendages on its gills throbbed as it dove back into the water. Harris watched the water settle. He nodded toward the heavy steel door. Open it. Turning the wheel, the latch popped free. Pulling the door open, we shined our flashlights into the echoing darkness of the tank. Sitting in the corner, surrounded by half-eaten rats, was a man. He was shivering violently, clutching his knees to his chest. His clothes were soaked in a dark, oily water as the flashlight beams hit his face. He hissed, shielding his eyes with blood-stained hands. Griggs? Harris whispered, lowering his gun slightly. It was Griggs, the man who fell overboard during the squall a week ago. How are you alive? I asked the question aloud, unable to comprehend what I was seeing. Griggs bellowed incoherently, his voice raspy and choked with salt water. He crawled backward, pressing his spine against the rusted metal wall. The dark, Griggs muttered, his eyes darting wildly. The trenches are so dark. They are starving down there, so hungry. As Griggs shifted, the flashlight beam caught the back of his neck. Rooted deeply into his spinal column was a pulsating red appendage. It was identical to the meaty coral growing on the Scared shark. The parasite throbbed rhythmically, pulsing with a sick sound. Veins from the appendage spread out across Greg's pale skin, digging into his jaw and shoulders. He's infected, Harris realized, raising his gun again. If that thing is controlling him, we can cut it off. I stepped forward, pulling a utility knife from my belt. If we remove the parasite, if we remove the parasite, maybe we can save him. Do not get too close, Harris warned, moving in slowly. He killed Sullivan and Toby. Griggs, stay still. Stepping toward the shivering man. We are going to help you. But Griggs lunged. He moved with impossible speed, snapping his teeth toward my arm. Harry stepped in, slamming the butt of his pistol against Griggs' temple. The blow knocked the feral man to the ground. Harris pressed his knee into Griggs' back, pinning him against the rusted floor. Cut it off! Hurry! Gripping the knife, I knelt next to the thrashing man. I placed the blade against the base of the red appendage, right where it rooted into his neck, then applied pressure, before slicing through the meaty tissue. Griggs shrieked. It was a sign of agonizing pain that echoed off the steel walls. Then black fluid sprayed out of the wound, coating my hands and the knife. The fluid burned like acid, and the appendage thrashed wildly, trying to reattach itself to the open cut. Griggs twisted his head, stared at me with entirely black eyes. You don't understand. Griggs babbled with blood and black fluid spilling from his mouth. The deep is starving. Human meat is the only thing that can satiate it. He convulsed violently, throwing Harris off his back. Then he stood up, clutching his bleeding neck. The remaining portions of the parasite pulsed rapidly, trying to heal the damage. If once more, Griggs whispered, taking a step toward me, but a gunshot rang out inside the metal tank. The bullet, the bullet struck Griggs directly in the chest. He stumbled backward, looking down at the hole in his shirt. Harris fired twice more. Griggs collapsed onto the rusted floor, his body twitching as a black fluid pooled around him. The red appendage on his neck stopped pulsating, then slowly deflated, turning a dull, dead gray. Harris stood over the body, breathing heavily. He looked at me, his face pale and slick with sweat. We cannot let this spread to the rest of the crew, Harry said, his voice trembling slightly. If someone else gets infected, the entire ship will become a feeding ground. What are we gonna do with him? Wiping the burning black fluid off my hands onto my pants. The same thing we did with Sullivan, Harry decided grimly. We hauled Craig's body up to the maintenance stairs. It took us an hour to drag him to the stern of the ship. Thankfully, the deck was completely empty. We threw him over the railing, then watched the body plunge into the dark water below. The scarred shark appeared almost instantly. It snatched Greg's body in its jaws and dragged him into the depths. Following this, the bizarre shark sank beneath the waves and was never seen pacing the ship again. The rest of the voyage was a nightmare of silence. Harris logged Toby and Sullivan as casualties of a severe viral outbreak, strictly, strictly enforcing isolation protocols until we reached the mainland. The crew asked questions, but Harris shut them down with unquestionable authority. When the ship finally docked at the mainland port in California, the relief was overwhelming. The ramp lowered and the crew began disembarking immediately. Packing my duffel bag in my cabin, my only thought was getting as far away from the ocean as possible. Leaving the ship, I walked down the loading dock toward the employee parking lot. Captain Harris was standing by his pickup truck. He was wearing a heavy jacket with the collar turned up against the coastal fin. Walking over to him, I wanted to say a final goodbye. We had survived. We had survived something horrific together, and there was a strange bond in that shared trauma. Are you heading home, Captain? Asking as I approached the truck. I'm gonna notify the authorities about what happened. I'm going to notify the authorities about what happened. Harris said, pulling his car keys from his pocket. The Coast Guard needs to know about the biological hazard, and of course, they need to quarantine the ship before the next crew boards. This is a good idea. Nodding in agreement. I'm just going to catch a bus back to the city. I don't think I'll be signing another maritime contract anytime soon. I don't blame you, Harris replied, offering a tight, forced smile. As he turned to unlock his truck door, a gust of wind caught his jacket. The high collar slipped down his neck for just a fraction of a second. Then my heart completely stopped. Rooted deeply into the base of Captain Harris' neck was a throbbing red mass of the same meaty appendage, pulsing rhythmically beneath his skin. Harris realized the collar had slipped. He frantically pulled the fabric up, concealing the parasite. He slowly turned his head to look at me. Have a safe trip home, Harris said, his voice unnaturally calm. Harris said, his voice unnaturally calm. He got into his truck, started the engine, and drove out of the parking lot. All while I stood perfectly still, clutching my duffel bag. I was paid $100 every Thursday for 6 months to pretend to be my elderly neighbor's daughter. Names will change and some slight details for privacy reasons. No TLDR because I really don't know how to exactly summarize this. I realized how bad the title sounds. It wasn't sexual. It wasn't even particularly creepy. I don't know what to call it. His name was Frank. He lived 3 houses down from me and was somewhere in his late 70s. I started helping him last winter after I saw him trying to drag his trash can through the snow. I had seen him around before. He had one of those houses where everything looked frozen in 1998. Fake flowers in the window boxes, ceramic goods on the porch, big in the driveway that I don't think moved once the entire time I knew him. I carried his trash down for him. He tried to give me $20. I told him no. The next afternoon, there was an envelope taped to my front door with $20 inside, and a note that said, "Don't insult an old man twice. Frank." That was basically how we became friends. I would bring his groceries inside sometimes, change batteries in his smoke detectors, reset his router whenever he somehow managed to disconnect it. Then, about 6 months ago, he made me a strange offer. He asked if I'd have dinner with him every Thursday. I can cook, he said. I laughed because the man lived almost exclusively on canned soup. Then he added, I'll give you $100. I told him absolutely not. He insisted. I finally asked why. He stared at his kitchen table for a while and then said, My daughter and I don't speak anymore. He stared at his kitchen table. He stared at his kitchen table for a while and then said, My daughter and I don't speak anymore. This was the first time he had ever mentioned having a kid. There were no family pictures in his house except one old photograph of the bookshelf. Frank standing beside a girl who looked maybe 12 or 13. Same nose, same eyes. I asked what happened. He said I wasn't a very good father. That was it. No excuses, no story about an ungrateful kid. Just that. Then he explained the weird part. He didn't only want me to eat dinner with him, he wanted me to pretend I was his daughter. Not roleplay some elaborate backstory, he just wanted me to sit across from him, talk about my week, complain about work, tell him things I was irritated about. Occasionally if I was comfortable with it, call him dad. I actually laughed because I thought he was joking, but he wasn't. If you squint, you kind of look like her, at least how I remember her. This ought to work. I asked him why again. He said I need practice. That made it seem less creepy and more sad. I figured I needed the money and was helping an old man that clearly had no bridges left to cross. So I agreed. The first Thursday was unbelievably awkward. Frank made spaghetti, he burned the garlic bread, we sat there talking about my manager, my car making a weird noise, some stupid argument I had with my sister. Then, halfway through the dinner, Frank interrupted me. Can we try something? I knew what he meant. I felt ridiculous, but I said, sure, Dad. The man's entire face changed. No tears, but the paint rolled off of him. He stared down at his plate for a few beats, obviously gathering himself. Okay, he said quietly. Thank you. After that, Thursdays became normal, sort of. Every week, he'd give me an envelope with $100. Every week, I sit at his kitchen table and tell him about my life. Sometimes he'd ask me to get angry at him. That was the weird part. Tell me I wasn't there for you. Frank, please. So I'd say it. You weren't there for me, he'd answer. I know. Tell me I needed you. I needed you. I know. Once, he asked me to stay. He chose being right over having a daughter. Once, he asked me to say, you chose being right over having a daughter. I remember that one because after I repeated it, he couldn't respond. His wrinkled jaws seized up and his eyes glazed over. He got up and stood at the sink for about 5 minutes, pretending to wash an already clean plate. Eventually, I asked if he was okay. He said that one was accurate. I started piecing together what had happened. His daughter had gotten pregnant when she was 17. Frank had been extremely religious back then. He threw her out. His wife begged him to let her come home. He refused. His daughter eventually married the baby's father. His daughter eventually married the baby's father. Frank didn't attend the wedding. Years passed. Frank's wife developed cancer. His daughter came to the hospital once. Frank and his daughter apparently had an argument in the hallway. She left. His wife died 2 days later. That was 15 years ago. Frank hadn't spoken to his daughter since. I asked him multiple times why he didn't just call her. He always had an excuse. Didn't have her number, didn't know where she lived, didn't want to disrupt her life. She probably hated him. Finally, one Thursday, I got irritated. You keep paying me to rehearse an apology you're never actually going to make. He looked offended, probably because I wasn't following the script anymore. Then I asked, who are you really doing this for? Her or you? He didn't pay me that night. I thought our arrangement was over. Then, the following Thursday, he knocked on my door. He handed me $200. Back pay, he said. Then he said, you were right. After that, something changed. He started writing. I'd come over and he'd have pages scattered across the kitchen table. Letters. He never let me read them, not a word, but he did ask questions. If someone says that they are sorry but explains why they did it, is that still an apology? I told him that explaining can look like justification sometimes, so probably not. He scratched out almost an entire page. Another week he asked, should you ask someone to forgive you? I said, I don't think so. That puts another responsibility on the person you hurt. He scratched something else out. Another week he asked, is saying I was doing what I thought was best an excuse? Yes. Another line disappeared. Eventually his letter was only 2 pages long. Then, about 3.5 weeks ago, Frank didn't answer his door. I could see the television on through the window. I called his phone. Nothing. My stomach sank. My first thought was, fuck, he's dead. I'm about to find a dead body. My friend's dead body. I could see the television on through the window. I called his phone. Nothing. My stomach sank. My first thought was, fuck, he's dead. I'm about to find a dead body. My friend's dead body. I went around back because he sometimes left the kitchen door unlocked. I found him on the floor beside the refrigerator. He was alive, barely. I called 911. Frank had suffered a stroke. I visited him once at the hospital, but he wasn't conscious. Seeing him lay there like that, being kept alive by a bunch of wires, hit me harder than I anticipated. I couldn't bring myself to go back. Maybe I should have. He died 4 days later. I figured that was the end of the story until about a week ago. I was bringing my trash can out. I was bringing my trash can back when a car pulled into Frank's driveway. A woman got out. A woman got out, maybe late 40s. She stood staring at the house. Then she noticed me. Did you know Frank? The second she spoke, I knew. Same eyes. It was his daughter. Her name is Rebecca. I told her I had helped him around the house. Her expression changed slightly. Helping him how? I explained the groceries, trash, the little household things. I didn't mention Thursdays or our arrangement. Then he asked, did he ever talk about me? I lied. I said, I little. Rebecca laughed, a thought, though it was hollow. Let me guess, I abandoned him? That caught me off guard. I debated on what to say, suddenly finding that I'm holding a dead man's secrets close to my chest. No, he said, he wasn't a good father. She stared at me, and then she started crying immediately. When she finally spoke, she said, he knew where I lived. Rebecca wiped her face. He knew where I lived the entire time. Apparently, she lives 20 minutes away. Frank knew her address. He knew her phone number. He knew where she worked. And here is the part I hadn't known. Rebecca had written to him for fucking years. Christmas cards, pictures of his Christmas cards, pictures of his grandchildren, an invitation to her son's graduation, letters. She stopped about 8 years ago because Frank never answered. I wanted to vomit because suddenly his whole story looked different. He hadn't been an old man searching desperately for the daughter he lost. He hadn't been an old man searching desperately for the daughter he lost. She had been reaching toward him and he had ignored her. Rebecca asked again if he had talked about her. I told her everything. A knee-jerk reaction on my end. The dinners, the $100, the rehearsed arguments, calling him dad. Her face went completely blank. I will never forget the way she looked at me. He paid you? I immediately tried explaining that it wasn't like that. That he was practicing, that he regretted what he had done, that he wanted to apologize even if the old man was a liar. I felt a strange need to try to explain for him. But every sentence made it worse. He needed a stranger to practice being my father. I didn't have an answer. Then she said something that made the ever growing pit in me widen. I'm real glad that you could be his daughter for him before he died, but I needed that in life. I looked for the verse, but nothing fit together right. I'm so sorry, I was just trying to help. I didn't realize. I didn't know the whole story. Rebecca just nodded more to herself than to me before walking into Frank's house alone. I stood outside for a few minutes, not knowing whether to leave or stay. Then I remembered something. The letter. Frank had finally finished it the Thursday before his stroke. I had watched him put it into an envelope. He had written Rebecca's full name on the front. He kept it in a drawer beside the kitchen table. I went inside. Rebecca was standing in the living room staring at the old photograph of herself. I told her there was something she needed to see. I opened the drawer. The envelope was still there. Her name written in Frank's shaky handwriting. Rebecca wouldn't touch it. She stared at it for maybe 30 seconds. Then she said he could have mailed it. I said nothing. What can I say? Because, yeah, apparently he fucking could have. He had a stamp? I noted. She scoffed and shook her head. Then she said something I've been thinking about constantly. He was still waiting for me to come to him. She left. The letter is was left sitting in Frank's drawer. She didn't take it, but here's where things get complicated. Today I went back because Frank's brother asked me to find some paperwork. While looking through the kitchen, I noticed a cardboard pushed I noticed a cardboard box pushed behind a stack of newspapers. Rebecca's name was written on it. Inside were dozens of envelopes, every Christmas card, every photograph, every graduation announcement she had ever sent him. None of them were unopened. Frank had read everything. He had pictures of his grandchildren taped together where they had ripped at the folds, and underneath of all of them was a birthday card Rebecca sent 8 years ago, the last thing she had apparently ever met him. Inside, she had written, "Dad, I'm not asking you to apologize anymore. I just don't want you to die before we figure out how to be in the same room again." Frank had underlined that sentence twice. Now I think I understand why he hired me. He was he wasn't practicing an apology, he was practicing merely being able to be in the same room with her. And somehow that makes me angrier because eventually practice becomes another way of avoiding the actual thing. He avoided it all the way to his grave. I called Rebecca this afternoon, told her I had found the box. There was silence for a long time. Did he keep the pictures? I said yes. All of them. She started crying. I think she cried a long time. I think she needed to. So I stayed silent on the line. Eventually, she asked me not to throw anything away before hanging up. I didn't tell her that I put the letter in that box. Part of me thinks it's hers and she deserves the chance to read it. Another part of me keeps hearing what she said. He could have mailed it, and she's right. Frank had 6 months. He had her address, he had stamps, he had a telephone. He had me sitting across from him every Thursday, helping him find the perfect words. He just never found the courage to actually say them. I spent 6 months pretending to be Frank's daughter. Now his real daughter is the one who has to decide whether she wants to hear what he finally learned to say. Now his real daughter is the one who has to decide whether he sh- Now his real daughter is the one. The research vehicle Endeavour. The following has been transcribed from the video log of Craig Thompson, research scientist, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, April 9th, 2026. My name is Dr. Craig Thompson. I'm currently on day 16 aboard research vessel RV Guidance in the Pacific Ocean. I have decided to write down my notes as we continue forward on our journey. We have been tasked with continuing the research of the RV Endeavour. 6 months ago, the last communication from the Endeavour was received. 4 months following the last communications, an extensive search effort was underway, but no sign of wreckage or crew were located. That is until 1 month ago when a small amount of wreckage washed ashore in Guam. The local NOAA field office was notified and the contents were sent to my office in San Diego for further examination. The Endeavour and crew were on a 2 month research and survey mission around areas of the Mariana Trench, following strange seismic activity and sounds captured by NOAA dart buoys. The buoys commonly use bottom pressure recorders, BPRs, and hydrophones to monitor low frequency tremors indicative of tsunamis and seismic activity. The recorded activity detected prior to the launch of the RV Endeavour's mission was unlike any we had seen before. Our head office decided that the findings warranted further investigation, and Dr. Adam Williams set off with a 50-man crew. The trip was supposed to take roughly 24 days to get to the survey area, which would allow him up to roughly 2 weeks of surveying and measurement in the area of address. The Endeavour was supposed to then start the voyage back to home base. The limited wreckage recovered was seemingly coated in a strange, slime like substance that our leadership quickly dismissed as naturally occurring, like an algae. Among the small amount of debris recovered was a container belonging to Dr. Williams. Inside the container were recordings made by him, and while the recorder was badly damaged, the tapes seemingly survived. After days of desperately needed repair and drying, I'm finally able to re- I'm finally able to listen to his recording. I will be sure to report I'll be sure to report any significant findings. April 11th, 2026. I have currently made it to day 19 of Dr. Williams' notes, and they have been incredibly detailed. He has taken multiple measurements each day along his path from the water temperature, wind speeds, as well as multiple recordings from seismic and audio recording equipment. As of yet, he has been unable to locate any instance of the initial findings that brought him out there. He stated the condition of the team and crew was undeterred and in relatively high spirits. He did, however, mention a small portion of the crew members seemingly under high amounts of anxiety and nausea. They were sent to medbay and later released with the medical staff's clearance. Nothing further significant to report. April 12th, 2026. I am on day 20 of Dr. Williams' recordings. They are roughly 700 nautical miles from the survey area, and I can only describe them as strange. He reported more of the crew with similar symptoms to those from days prior. While he places the blame on the crew just being seasick, there is a noticeable concern in his voice. Furthermore, he claims he has started picking up strange anomalies in his readings. He claimed that there would be spikes in activity. First, low rumbling similar to those initial recordings, but then he claimed to hear faint, high-pitched chittering. What could he have possibly heard? It doesn't make any sense. The man has done this for so long, and I have never seen or heard any. The man has done this for so long, and I have never seen or heard even the slightest sign of him being unnerved. That's all for tonight. I'll continue tomorrow. April 13th, 2026. I have completed reviewing day 21 of Dr. Williams' recordings. That's the day he arrived at the edge of the survey area, and well, you should hear his words yourself, as I don't know what to say or make of it. Dr. Thompson pushes play as Dr. Williams' recordings begin. The day is finally here. We have arrived at the edge of our survey area and moving further in now to begin. A loud crash and the sound of falling equipment can be heard. What the hell was that? God, just look at this mess. My equipment is everywhere. The tape cuts out and then continues. I just spoke to the captain. It appears as if we had engine failure. He claimed the boat had just stopped as if it had run aground, but there's no way that could have happened this far out. At least while they are sorting the engine out, I can continue my search. I don't want to lose any research time while they're repairing the ship. I'll have the team deploy some equipment to keep us busy and report back later. Hours later, the crew will be the death of me. They've been fumbling with that engine for over 4 hours and no one can seem to figure out why we are not moving. The maintenance team claimed there didn't appear to be anything wrong with it. They said the engine itself is seemingly responding to controls, and yet we have not budged an inch in hours. They have no idea what part of the system is broken. On top it, to top it all off, our communication systems appears to have gone out as well. We have tried to reach out to anyone who will listen and have heard nothing but static for hours. We are right where we should be for this project and can't do a damn thing of any value. Audio testing came back, and there are things I cannot explain. I've gotten many recordings of low rumbling, but it isn't right. It isn't static or predictable. The times between are varying, and it's coming from different locations, almost like it's moving. There has to be a logical explanation for this. Wind reading were just as confusing as the equipment. Show no wind speed. It's the open ocean, for God's sake. We should be seeing at least a few knots. Weeks of travel and nothing to show for it other than inconclusive information. And off audio recordings as Dr. Thompson resumes. What could possibly have stopped a ship dead in the water? What did he mean? It's moving. Is his equipment faulty? Did it break in the sudden stop? Nothing about this adds up, but Dr. Williams has seldom been wrong before. I'm going to continue listening, and I'll report more tomorrow. April 14th, 2026. I have finished the remainder of Dr. Williams' clocks, and I feel any faint hope I had for it. My friend or the crew being found alive has been dashed. Dr. Thompson looks down at his play as Dr. Williams' voice begins. 2 days. For 2 days, we have languished in the same exact location. The crew is unable to get us moving and has been unable to come up with any reason for why. They have all but given up on any repair efforts for the engines. Furthermore, our communications still remain as just useless. No response, no other traffic has come across any channel for days. Nothing but nothing but unrelenting static and silence. No other ships have come anywhere near us either. Not so much as a damn plane in the sky to attempt to signal. It's as if we are completely cut off from the world around us. The crew has begun to get restless. Several of them have reported hearing the sounds of something on the underside of the ship. Then they are below deck, like something's crawling or scratching at the side. This morning, a small fist-sized hole opened below deck and water started to pour in. Luckily, a crew member was there and got it under control before it got out of hand. Minutes later, another opened and was eventually repaired. Then a third. Each time a hole appeared, it was preceded by a low rumble, followed by the same chittering sound I had documented earlier in the week. Each time it seemed as followed by the same chittering sound I had documented earlier in the week. Each time it seemed as if the sound was getting louder. The captain has been trying to keep everyone calm, but what is he say? What is he to say? We don't have the slightest prospect of getting ourselves out of our predicament. Our last hopes lie with the same three-man team the captain picked to take a small emergency boat to hopefully make it to land somewhere around us, but that's an act of desperation. Even if they made it the hundreds of miles, would they return while the ship is still afloat? Only time will tell. We are about to see them off now. We are uh we are about we are about to see them off now. Dr. Williams' recordings resumes, and it's the following day. The doctor's voice is noticeably shaken and seems to have certainly recently sobbing. It seems the end is now near. When we tried to launch the emergency boat, any hope we had was dashed out as fast as it came. The captain picked three men, Matt Winters, Clay Sampson, and Josh Miller, to go on what would be our last chance at rescue. We lowered the men and boat into the ocean as they got no more than 100 feet from the ship. We lowered the men and boat into the ocean, and as they got no more than 100 feet from the ship, A huge torrent of water and violence erupted beneath him. Within seconds, the three men and the boat they were on seemingly vanished beneath the water. No sign of the men or the vessel resurfaced. The ocean was still as if nothing had happened. The only thing that there had been any life at all was the red tinge of blood. The final log of Dr. Williams begins to play, and an unnerving sense of calm can be heard in his voice, interrupted only by slight sobs of crew members in the background. This will be my final recording. The ship has begun sinking. It started to list to the port side not long ago, and rooms on ship have begun to fill with water. Then there are sounds like teeth grinding against the hull. Most of the crew is gone, consumed, taken away by something like masses moving across the ceiling, twisting and warping in unexplainable ways, rapidly filling the passageways. It moves so quickly. Muffled screams can be heard in the background as loud bangs erupt in the deafening roar. Oh God! The tape abruptly ends. Dr. Thompson sits silently as he ponders the last words of Dr. Williams. The door in the back of Dr. Thompson's room opens and the captain steps in and says, Dr. Thompson, we have arrived at the edge of the survey area. My 28 male close friend, 28 male, had a vasectomy and is keeping it a secret from his wife, 27 female, who is also a close friend. What do I do? Trigger warning, miscarriage, deception. This will be long, I apologize. I have known my friend Kevin and his wife Emily since high school, and we have stayed very close. The three of us went to different colleges, but they were all within an hour drive of each other. We spent a lot of time together. They got together towards the end of our first year and got married soon after graduation. They have been married about 6 years, together around 9. After graduating, they all moved back to the metro area where we grew up. Although we live about 45 minutes apart, still my wife and I spend a lot of time with them. She and Emily have grown to be very good friends and often hang out together without the husbands. Kevin and I also spent quite a bit of time together without the wives, as I was always closer to him than Emily anyway. Before getting married, Kevin and Emily had some early disagreements about children. Emily was very set on having children, and Kevin wasn't sure that he wanted any. Kevin eventually agrees that and said he would think about it, and they didn't really discuss it again until after they got married. Around 5 years ago, Emily gradually started bringing up the fact that she was ready to start trying to get pregnant. Kevin was adamantly against having children at that point and told her he wanted to wait until he was at a more stable point in his career. He was still at his first post college job, and while he was making good money for someone his age, the job he was in generally isn't long term. Think of a field like consulting, where junior level employees typically have a 2 to 4 year shelf life before they are expected to move on to something else. He told her that he wanted to wait a few years, as the expectation was that she would probably stay at home for a year or two after having the baby. During this ongoing discussion, Kevin confided in me that, while the career explanation was true, it wasn't the whole truth. He was still unsure, but he actually wanted to have kids at all and wanted to put it off until he was sure that he really wanted to. He knew it was unfair to Emily not to disclose his feelings on this, but he was worried about her reaction, given how adamant she was about having children. After much discussion, Emily agrees to wait until Kevin has a more permanent job. Around 2.5 years ago, that happened. He took a job in house with one of his long term clients and ended up with a small pay jump, much better benefits, a more predictable schedule with less travel, and a lot more job security. Almost immediately after he took the new job, Emily brought up getting pregnant, and Kevin agreed to start trying. As far as I knew at the time, Kevin agreed and Emily stopped taking birth control. Flash forward to the present, no children yet. Up until this point, as I understand it anyway, their only attempts at conceiving have been to continue their normal activities since birth control. Since this hasn't worked, Emily has started discussing the possibility of going to a fertility doctor to see if there are any problems. The woman, the woman on her mother's side of the family, mother, grandmother, and aunt and a cousin, have a history of having problems conceiving. Although with eventual success, I'm not sure what the exact issues are, but I know that Emily's grandmother and mother were 29 before they were able to conceive, with both trying since their early 20s. Yesterday, Kevin confided in me that before he left his previous job, he had a vasectomy without telling Emily. After picking my jaw up off the floor, I started asking him questions to figure out why the hell would he do that. Apparently, after he began to put out feelers for a new job, a process that took about a year, Emily had brought up going ahead and getting pregnant. Kevin pushed back pretty hard to wait, and she told him that was fine. Evidently, Kevin was really leaning back towards not wanting children. I wasn't aware of this since we never really talked about it after the aforementioned conversation. After he got the new job and they started trying to conceive, I just figured out he changed his mind and got on board. Shortly after they once again agreed to wait, Kevin became suspicious that Emily wasn't taking her birth control. He would check her pill packs, but wasn't able to confirm one way or another if she was taking them regularly or not. According to him, Emily was acting suspiciously, not sure what the specifics were, but and was initiating sex much more than and was initiating sex much more often than usual. There was something about her periods as well, but I don't remember the reasoning behind the discussion. Evidently, after considering the evidence available to him, he was convinced that she had stopped taking her birth control and was trying to get pregnant after they had agreed to wait. He was angry but didn't want to confront her with evidence that could be explained away easily by her. At this point, I don't know if she was actually taking her birth control or not. He could have been right or just paranoid. Given his lack of trust of Emily and his increasing desire to not to have children, he decided to get a vasectomy and not tell her. There was a point where he was traveling for a job, which happened often and was going to be a few states away for about a week and a half. He traveled through the city frequently and was somehow able to arrange a vasectomy done at that time. The initial trip was supposed to be 10 days, but a weekend snowstorm caused his flight to be cancelled, and his employer arranged visits to a urologist and a vasectomy, not to mention the follow up visits. I'm also unclear about how long it took him to do this. The timing worked out to where the soreness and swelling was gone by the time he returned from the trip, and according to him, the scar is completely unnoticeable unless you shine a flashlight on the bottom's walls and look closely. So, in the past 3 years, she has never suspected anything. I guess he was always had his insurance information sent to his office, had enough spare cash shocked away to cover his copay antibiotics, medicine, and medication. And he changed insurance when he took his new job, so there aren't any cards laying around or in an online account. So that was all well and good for a 4 years, for a few years. So that was all well and good for a few years. But now he is in tight spot because if Emily goes to the fertility doctor and things check out on her end, the next logical step is for him to get tested, at which point it will be obvious to the doctor that he had a vasectomy. or at least he thinks this. I don't know whether that's true or if the test was show just to him shooting blanks. He gambled on the fact that blame on. He gambled on the fact that Emily's family has a history of problems conceiving, so maybe there will be issues there to place the blame on. He has no idea what to do, but stretch out guesses that he can stretch this out a year or two before he has to go to get tested. I am really struggling with this. On the one hand, Kevin is my best friend. On the other hand, he is being totally deceitful to Emily, one of my closest friends. I'm not judging him for not wanting kids, but this is something he should have communicated to her before now. If he had talked to me about the situation before he got the vasectomy, I would have told him that he needed to get break things off with her and move on if he was sure he didn't want kids. It wouldn't be fair to her, and it wouldn't be fair to him if they end up having children by accident or design when they didn't want to. But that's not what happened. He's been lying to her for years. I can't tell my wife about this because I have no doubt she will call Emily and tell her immediately. I'm trying to decide whether I should tell Kevin that he has to tell Emily or I will, or completely stay out of the situation. I feel bad about the entire situation, and I don't want to break up their marriage or destroy one or more friendships. But I also don't want Emily to waste any more of her time when having kids is such a big deal to her. What the hell do I do? Idiot 1. Thanks for the advice, everyone. I think I have decided on a course of action. I'm meeting up with Kevin for drinks in an hour or so. I'm going to give him an ultimatum. Either he tells Emily within 3 days or I will. I am also going to tell my wife after my meeting with Kevin because I can't keep something like this from her and live with myself. I will try to get her to sit on the information as long as possible, but if she tells Emily, then I can't fault her for doing what is probably the right thing. I am going to tell Kevin that I am telling my wife as soon as I get home from meeting with him, and impress upon him the strong possibility that she will tell Emily before he has a chance. This will give him an incentive to tell her sooner, rather than later. I will probably ask my wife to let me be there when she tells Emily, if she decides that she won't wait. That way we can both be there for support and I might have a chance of staying friends with her after this is all over. I will post an update at some point after the shit hits the fan. Thanks again everyone. It did too. Just left from talking with Kevin, and I took the exact approach outlined in my first edit. And it went as well as one could hope. He was understanding and apologized for putting me in this situation. He understood my need to tell my wife and said that he wished he had taken that approach in his own marriage. He realizes he needs to tell Emily and the marriage is likely over. After some reflection, he thinks this is probably for the best because she will never trust him again and he really doesn't want kids. He is going to sit down and talk with her tomorrow afternoon. Edit 2.5. Just finished talking with my wife. Holy fuck. I will have one hell of an update soon. I don't have time to write it out right now because I need to go to sleep. I'm pretty drained from all of this. I'll update this up sometime tomorrow. I'll either edit this thread or post a new one if it takes me longer to write. Stay tuned. If you like a drama, just fucking wait. 83. So a lot has happened since last night. Holy hell. First off, Emily isn't pregnant as far as anyone knows. So sorry if you're hoping for that. I will try to write what happened chronologically so it makes more sense. Here we go. So, I told my wife everything last night after I got home from meeting with Kevin. As you might expect, she was absolutely floored and that he would do this to her, given how much she wants kids. She didn't take it as bad as I thought she would, though, which was weird at the time. I really thought her reaction was going to be to say that we need to tell Emily immediately, drive over to their house in a blind rage, etc. Instead, she told me that she had something to tell me that she had been keeping a secret for a long while. Evidently, a little over a year ago, Emily and my wife were discussing Kevin and Emily's attempts at conceiving. It wasn't unusual for them to talk about this, since at that point they had been trying for over a year. On this night, though, Emily had quite a bit to drink and opened up to my wife more than usual. Emily was desperate to start going to the fertility doctor, but Kevin wanted to wait because they had been trying too very long. Unless I misunderstood him. Kevin seemed to simply Kevin seemed to imply that Emily had only recently started suggesting going to a fertility doctor. No, she has been telling him she wanted to go for over a year. My wife asked her why she wanted to go soon, since they had been trying that long. Emily told her that she had been trying for nearly 4 years. What the F? The following explanation of this is pieced together from my conversation with my wife, what Kevin told me, and my own inferences. I've tried as best as I can. I've tried as best as I can to make the pieces fit together in a way that makes sense. I will update and edit if I find out any of the details are incorrect. Emily stopped taking her birth control while Kevin was still at his old job before he ever started looking for a new one. She pretended to take her pills, hoping she would get pregnant and could blame it on the fact that birth control isn't 100% effective. Side note, my wife was absolutely thrilled by the revelation and does not condone her behavior, but continued listening to try and support her friend through what has been a really difficult experience. She stopped taking her pills before 6 months before Kevin started looking for a new job. This is the same time at which she started pressuring Kevin to move on from that job. I guess it took 6 months to convince him to finally start the process. So Kevin agrees that it's time to leave his job, starts taking starts talking with headhunters, gently approaching his current clients, etc. They have the above mentioned talk about going ahead and trying to conceive. Kevin says no and she agrees to wait. The reason she brought it up on that particular day is that she thought she might already be pregnant, given that her period was late and she had been trying for 6 months. A couple days later, Emily got a pack of pregnancy tests, and 3 positive results later, she's pregnant. She's excited as hell, but wants to wait a bit to tell Kevin, given that they had just agreed to wait out to have kids until he got a new job. Fuck. My wife thinks Emily was probably around 2 to 3 weeks long at this point. About a week and a half later, Kevin is out for state of work, and Emily is planning to spring the news on him when he gets back. He's gone from Sunday night and is supposed to return late on Friday. On Monday night, Emily has a miscarriage. Evidently, this is one of the common mishaps that the women in her family are prone to. My wife told me that Emily's mother had at least 3 miscarriages before successfully carrying her first pregnancy to term. Emily is absolutely devastated. She doesn't tell Kevin about it because then he will realize that she hasn't been taking her birth control. And shit will hit the fan. She calls my wife, who goes over to her house to comfort her. No, my wife does not know about the miscarriage at this point, just that Emily was really upset over something. Emily only told her the truth a year ago. I actually think I remember what night this happened on because it was unusual for my wife to drive all the way to Kevin and Emily's house to hang out with her. Usually they met somewhere in the middle. So Emily is obviously upset about this, but manages to get herself together by the time Kevin gets back. She doesn't say anything about it, but immediately starts trying to conceive again. My guess is that this would be the time where Kevin becomes suspicious about her behavior. He was right that she was taking her birth control, but he only realized it after she had a miscarriage and tried even harder to get pregnant again. As far as anyone knows, Emily never got pregnant again because between this time and when Kevin had the vasectomy. During a routine visit, Emily asked her OBGYN if there were any problems and told her about the miscarriage. This happened before Kevin started his new job, and they officially agreed to start trying to conceive. I don't know if Emily told I don't know, that she had stopped taking birth control, or if she implied that it was accidental. The OBGYN identified something with her uterus that could possibly cause an issue, but said she couldn't be sure from a routine exam. She suggested that Emily see a fertility specialist and gave her referral. Evidently, the specialist wanted to do the first consultation with both Kevin and Emily there, so Emily couldn't start the process until Kevin was on board with conceiving. So that's the state of things. Emily was lying to Kevin about being on birth control for at least 1.5 years. My wife never told me because she wasn't sure what to do, since they had officially started trying to have children by the time Emily told her about all this. My wife decided to keep the information to herself because it didn't matter at that point anyway. I called Kevin and told him about this late at night. He wasn't upset as I thought he would be because he already figured that Emily had stopped taking her birth control back then, although it was actually 6 months before he caught on. He was pretty upset that the miscarriage and felt really bad that Emily had to keep this to herself for all these years. As of right now, he hasn't talked to her yet. That will happen later this afternoon or tonight. Effort, effort, effort. I may post an update after he talks to her tonight, in all likelihood, though I'll wait a week or so and post an update after all this has died down, and hopefully they have decided what they are going to do. Update. 2 days later, well, Reddit, the situation has resolved itself. Kevin and Emily talked for a long time yesterday, and they've agreed that it's best for them to split up. Well, Reddit, the situation has resolved itself. Kevin and Emily talked for a long time yesterday, and they agreed that it's best for them to split up. They've agreed that it's best for them to split up. Too much damage done. And the lies they told each other were too big, not to mention the kids issue. I wasn't there obviously, but I've talked to them both and they seem better than I expected. Both of them are really angry, but as much is directed at themselves as each other. Strangely enough, they were both really glad for my involvement. Emily wasn't even pissed at my wife for telling me about the birth control fiasco. I have no idea whether my wife and I will be able to remain friends with either of them. They were both really deceitful to each other and to us, but I think I'm willing to move past on that eventually. We'll see how this goes. Thanks to everyone who commented. I don't think I would have approached this situation correctly were it not for some of the responses I got here. Damn, bro. I can't get this off my head, bro. I'm gonna have a headache soon. Bro, like, how can you lie to each other and keep this going for several years, bro? I'm not even commenting on this.